Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. My name is Tim Hannon, and I am joined by
Steve Word.
the esteemed Steve Ward.
Esteemed Steve Word. Yeah, I think no one's ever called me esteemed before, but I'll take it.
Oh, well, there's a first time for everything. This episode, we are going to talk about Pittsburgh sports tragedies. Pittsburgh sports, obviously, a lot of great moments, a lot of great players, and things to celebrate. Unfortunately, there's the flip side of that where a lot of people that were gone way too soon. And so in this episode, we wanted to look back on some of those stories and then also remember the lives of those people. And and I don't think you can start a list like this, Steve, without uh, Roberto Clemente, right? I mean,
It's probably number one on this list. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Clemente, a Hall of Fame outfielder for the Pirates, 3,000 hits, 15-time All-Star, two-time World Series champion, MVP of the World Series, MVP of the National League, 12-time Gold Glove winner, and maybe even more important than all that is what a great advocate he was for Latin ball players at a time when there's still a lot of very open racism in baseball. I think if you're doing a Mount Rushmore of Pittsburgh people, not just Pittsburgh sports figures, but just Pittsburgh people, I think Roberto Clemente has to be on there. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Mount Rushmore thing's kind of been done a lot, but yeah, if you would like, I always like better if you were redoing the mural. Yeah, remember the mural they used to
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
downtown with? I think he was on there, wasn't he? It was
I think he
Maz,
was.
Mario, and Mean Joe Green. Yeah, because it was him running around it's him standing on second with like his hat. Yeah, after it was at the 3,000 hit. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, definitely. I prefer the mural, I guess, than just for
Okay.
visual
Okay. Well,
purposes. But
we'll stick with
but
Merrill then
yeah,
instead of Mount
yeah.
Rushmore. Uh, I, I, I really don't want to spend too much time here on Roberto Clemente because honestly, at some
Deserves
point,
a whole podcast. Yeah.
absolutely, I feel like yeah, we have to do a deeper dive into
Yeah.
his life and the impact that he had on the city. Uh, we will talk about his death. He dies trying to help victims of an earthquake in Nicaragua. He had gotten reports that I guess the Nicaraguan army was stealing the supplies he had sent down to help these victims. And he decides, you know what, this time I'm going to go there myself. And on New Year's Eve in 1972, his plane crashes and Clemente is killed at the age of 38. I know people in this town. This was right before Steve and I were born, but I know people in this town to this day who remember exactly where they were and how completely devastated they were when they heard the news.
Wasn't it Neil Walker's dad was supposed to be on that plane, and he traded spots with him, I do
Mm,
believe. Yeah.
yeah,
And,
yeah, and that's what I mean. Everybody has
and
a
I think they
story.
actually crashed because they put too many supplies on the plane or something like that. Like they overloaded the plane or something like
Well,
that.
there was also a whole controversy about that plane having been deemed unfit or not inspected, something to that effect. Again, we really do need to do a deep dive into Clemente because there's a whole story behind that. So, like I said, you really can't start this list without putting Roberto Clemente on it. Very, very sad, very tragic. Was definitely at the end of his career, but still had a whole life in front of him and dies at the age of 38. Next guy on our list is Justin Strelzik. Justin Strelzik was an offensive lineman who was selected by the Steelers in the 11th round of the 1990 draft. There are not 11 rounds in the draft today. So that's with the equivalent, Steve, I guess, of what an undrafted free agent today, probably, right? 11th round.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. He would have been an undrafted free agent.
And Strelzik plays his way onto the team and ends up being with the Steelers for 9 seasons, which is pretty impressive for an 11th round slash undrafted free agent kind of a player. 9 seasons with the Steelers. And during that time, he's a pretty valuable player. he's never a star, but he plays every position except center. And so he ends up playing a lot. Anytime there's an injury or a guy departs in free agency, as has happened a lot during that era, he's plugged in. And this is during a time when the offensive line and the running game was really the backbone of the Steelers' success in the 1990s. Strelzik, also a character. He's this big bearded guy who smokes cigarettes and rides motorcycles. It's like really like a guy you would expect to see at a biker bar instead of an NFL uniform. Very big personality, fun loving type of guy. Also, not afraid to speak his mind. The Steelers said he would pick up the red phone on the Steelers sideline just so he could scream at the offensive coordinator to run the ball more.
I wonder if that was Chan Gailey. It's like yelling at Chan Gailey, like run the ball more.
Probably, probably. Uh, but it's funny too to look back at the 1990s as being such a different era because you don't think of it as that long ago. But you had this guy, Myron Cope. I remember listening. I would listen to Myron Cope do the post game locker room show, and he'd be looking for Justin Strelzik to bum cigarettes off of him. So here you have like the reporter and the players all smoking in the locker room after the game, and this isn't like the 30s. This is the 1990s.
Yeah.
So it's just funny to think like you would never see that in an NFL locker room post game today. But here we are not that long ago. That's what was happening.
And like what a down to earth like guy. Like there aren't a lot of those guys left in the league now. It's
That's very true. That's very
yeah.
true. Strelzik has some injuries near the end of the 90s, several of them off the field injuries, and the Steelers end up having to release him. And things kind of seem to spiral after that. He and his wife file for divorce, and a lot of his former teammates say he struggles to adapt to life away from football. By 2004, friends say he is definitely dealing with something, whether that is CTE from his playing days, whether that's depression, some other mental illness. That's unknown. What is known is that on September 30th, 2004, Strelzik leads New York State troopers on a very dangerous 40-mile highway chase. The police had punctured one of his tires, like they had laid down one of those strips that punctures your tires, and it blows his tire out, but he keeps driving his car on the rim, and he's swerving in and out of traffic. He's throwing beer bottles at other cars, and eventually he collides with a tanker truck. There's a pretty big explosion, and he is killed. Steve, do you remember when that happened?
I remember seeing the video. There's video of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah, it's not good. Not a good way to end. Yeah, whatever was going on with him, he just never could seem to find the help or the help he needed apparently. So that was definitely a sad way for him to go. Would have been nice to see him at those Steeler alumni weekends. He definitely would have been a fan favorite.
For sure. Yeah, and his story is portrayed in the Will Smith movie Concussion. Justin Strelzik is one of the characters in that, and the whole thing around his death and everything. So, again, whether that fell under the category of CTE or something else, those things are always hard to say, right? Because there are certainly
Well,
people that can struggle with mental illness without having played football.
right. I mean, you got to remember the brain is probably the least like understood, organ of the body. And we just don't know a lot about it, and it's probably, it's the most complex. And they just as time marches on and we learn more and more about it, hopefully things will get safer and treatments will get better.
Very sad story for a guy that was very well liked in Pittsburgh. The next guy on our list is Michel Briere. In 1970, Michel Briere is a promising 19-year-old rookie for the Penguins. Penguins head coach Red Kelly compares Briere to NFL running back Red Grange because of how fast and graceful he was on the ice. Like he looked like a running back skating up and down the ice. He has a pretty good regular season, but then he really goes to the next level in the playoffs. He leads the Penguins in scoring in the playoffs, and he eliminates the Oakland Seals with an overtime goal in the first round.
Who are these Oakland Seals of which you speak? Yeah.
I think I'd have to look up the history. I think they, um, I don't think they've moved or folded. I think they got absorbed into another franchise that still exists today. So they have, you can trace their history back through some franchise that exists today, I think, but don't quote me on that. But at the time, yes, the Oakland Seals were an NHL team that the Penguins eliminated on an overtime goal by Michel Briere. That year, the Penguins actually come within 2 wins of making it to the Stanley Cup Finals, which is pretty big because remember, this team is only 3 years old at this point. So here you have this young player on this young team, lots of optimism ahead, very similar to where the Pirates and Steelers were at this point in the early 70s, right? These teams that were up and coming and their best years were ahead of them. That summer, after the Penguins are eliminated, Briere goes back to his hometown in Quebec to marry his girlfriend. And he and a couple of buddies go out one night. He has a few drinks. Unfortunately, gets behind the wheel of his Mercury Cougar, and he's going way too fast. He can't negotiate a curve. The car flips and ejects him out. He suffers massive head trauma, languishes in a coma for 11 months, but never wakes up.
I didn't realize that. I knew he died in a car crash, but I didn't realize like he was in a coma for 11 months.
Yeah, and it's he never wakes up. Like he's semi-responsive at times, like the squeezing his hands and that kind of stuff, but not ever where he's able to communicate or anything like that. And if you look at the reports at the time, there were even some media reports that the Penguins were expecting him back mid-season and stuff like that. Well, he got in this car accident, he was just going to need time to heal, but it was just something that was unrecoverable. He passes away the following April at the age of 21. And that's just heartbreaking for so many reasons. I mean, the Penguins, they don't really have much success after that or another bona fide superstar of that pedigree until Mario Lemieux comes along 14 years later. But of course, it means so much more than just hockey because this was a guy with literally his entire life in front of him. His fiance and he had a son together. So that boy grows up without a father. And then his fiance is now 70 years old and she never does marry anybody else and says, even to this day, it's really hard to talk about.
So his son has to be like older than us, like in his 50s. He's been
Yes.
born in like 70, yeah.
Yeah. The Athletic, I believe it was the Athletic. I'll have to post a link to it. Does a really good follow up story about this. And they interview his fiance, they interview his son, who is now, I want to say like an investment banker or something like that, and has a family of his own. And just what a sad story it was. His son even has a Christmas card from his dad, and you almost cry reading this because it's that Christmas of 1970, and in the card, because Briere was in Pittsburgh and his son was living in Canada at the time, he says, Merry Christmas, and hopefully this is the last Christmas you have to spend without your dad.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's like crushing
Yeah.
that he still has that card. That same article, the family talks openly about they wonder if people in Pittsburgh know who Michel Briere is at this point because it's been so many years. And remember, he only played for the Penguins for that one season, and the Penguins weren't very popular at the time.
I think they retired his number, didn't they? Or
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
think that's the one thing that helps because anytime you go to a Penguins game,
Yeah, you see
there's
Barriere,
two,
yeah.
yeah, there's only two banners hanging from the ceiling or two numbers hanging from the
Yeah.
ceiling, and it's 66 and 21. So I think, even if people don't know who he is, people come to games and they're like, boy, I know who Mario Lemieux is. Who's that other guy, right? And then maybe you learn the story. So that helps that those are the only two numbers retired, right? I think that keeps his memory alive.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it's like the blue. I think it's in blue too, because that was the colors
Right.
back then.
That's what they
Yeah,
wore. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Two footnotes to the story. The Penguins, not a good history with car accidents, also killed in car accidents. General manager Baz Bastian, who we talked about in our episode about the Penguins tanking to get Mario, and also head coaches Ivan Holinka and Herb Brooks killed in car accidents.
Stay out of a car. Yeah. I don't know why her Brooks died. That was a weird one. And I don't know anything about Eva Malenka's wreck. But yeah, Herb Brooks was like just driving down the road. He wasn't drunk or he just had a car accident.
Well, that was Baz Bastien was the same way. He was on his way home from a some kind of benefit that they had in the city. Halenka, I don't know. I think I want to say that happened over in the Czech Republic.
I think so, yeah.
So I don't know much about that one. But just, gosh, just not a good, when you have four uh, sports figures from the same franchise killed in car accidents, that's just
Pretty major ones too. It wasn't like just some guy that had a cup of coffee here.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You could also add Tim Horton to that list, was killed in a car accident, who played for the
Well,
Penguins.
he literally did have a cup of coffee here and made lots of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Another kind of eerie thing. We said Briere worn the number 21. That was also the number worn by Roberto Clemente.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was a number of Pirates Hall of Famer Archie Vaughan, who tragically drowned at the age of 40. There's a really good Pittsburgh sports book called Unlucky 21, Steve, where the authors talk about how that number should be retired across the board by all the local teams. And they even point out how Steelers cornerback Dion Figures, who wore number 21,
Oh yeah, he got shot.
yeah,
Yeah.
was a victim of a drive-by shooting, but fortunately survived.
But he wasn't even like he was just driving down the street and somebody shot a bullet and it hit him. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Well,
like he was in some sort of shootout or even in a bad situation. He was just
no,
driving down the
uh,
street in his neighborhood and it's like
no.
uh,
I mean,
they weren't even
Clemente.
shooting at him. They were just shooting and
Well, hence the book Unlucky 21,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Clemente was trying to help people. Archie Vaughan was, I think that was a fishing thing where he drowned. It's, 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 yeah, I don't know. You have to believe in superstitions and stuff like that to think it's unlucky. And certainly you could argue, the Steelers have had, I don't, Mewelde Moore, Amos Zaraway. I
Yeah.
think Trey Norwood just recently had number 21.
Well, stay out of the river, Trey. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, is it bad luck or is it coincidence? I don't know, but that's kind of eerie that you have three guys that were number 21 who died very, very young. Next guy on our list is a guy whose name that a lot of folks are probably not going to know, but who played a very significant role in Pirates history. Guy's name is Harry Pulliam. He was a newspaper editor who owner Barney Dreyfuss makes the president of the Louisville Colonels. And as we talked about in a previous episode, the Louisville team is contracted by the National League and kind of folded into the Pirates in 1901. Pulliam is highly respected in baseball, and the significant role that I alluded to earlier is that he is the one who convinces a guy named Hannes Wagner to sign with the team. Not only that, but remember in that previous episode, we talked about during that era, Steve, how the American League had been formed and how they were pillaging all these players from the National League before they finally made a truce. Well, the Pirates didn't really lose any of their star players during that era, which is why they were winning pennants. And reportedly, one of the reasons was because the American League owners had a lot of respect for Harry Pulliam. So not only is Harry Pulliam responsible for getting Hannes Wagner to Pittsburgh, he's also responsible for keeping him here. He's so respected, in fact, that the owners vote to make him president of the entire National League. So, again, a name you probably don't remember, but during that time is very well known, very well liked, very successful. Unfortunately, his mental health starts to decline. People say he stops socializing. He goes out and he's whenever he's around people, he goes on these rants about how the National League owners want him out, even though he's an honorable guy. And there's a couple of theories as to what happened to him. One is that the stress of the job that he had, being the president of the National League, just overwhelmed him. There's a very famous incident in 1908 known as Merkel's boner, which
Oh yeah.
I still can't get
It's
over
just a
that that's the
mistake.
name that they chose for
It
this.
means mistake too.
I get it. I
It
just, you could have, there's plenty of other synonyms for mistakes you could have used. But
was
anyway,
1908.
that was 1908. The backstory there, if you're not familiar with that story, is that the Giants and Cubs are playing in a game that's going to decide the pennant, The Giants get what they think is a game-winning hit. All their fans storm the field, but the Giants guy that was on first base is a guy named Fred Merkel. He allegedly never touched second base, and so he's out
Yeah, they go into the stands and fight the fans
for the ball
and
and touch
yeah,
second base. Yeah. So that's a huge controversy, right? Like, well, the rule is you have to touch second or you're out. And how could you possibly determine if you touch second? There was 1,000 people in the field. So what has to happen is the president of the National League, who is Harry Pulliam, has to make a ruling, and he rules in favor of the Cubs, which of course ticks off all of New York City. And so a lot of people hate him after that, but it was either gonna be that or everybody in Chicago was gonna hate him, right? So
yeah.
kind of in a no-win situation there.
Well, he could have done what they did with the George Brett situation, make him replay the inning.
You could, but I mean, either way, again, the Giants, you took the pennant. The Giants would have won the pennant had they gotten that hit. So I mean, you still had to roll one way or the other, and it was the Giants. So maybe that's what's going on with him, is that just he knows that a bunch of people hate him, and that's probably hard. It's probably not a job he ever had before where he had to face that kind of pressure. The other theory is that he was never seen dating a woman, and he kind of wore flamboyant clothing, and so the theory is that
Once
he was
again, 1908.
right. The theory was that he was a closeted homosexual, which, of course, to your point, in those days, a lot more socially taboo, especially being in the sports world. Uh, Again, all of this just speculation. Regardless of the reason, he does take a leave of absence early in the 1909 season. And then one day in July of that year, he leaves his office. He says that he's not feeling well. And then later that night, workers at his apartment building find him bleeding from a gunshot wound to his head. There's also a gun right next to him, indicating that he had shot himself. I won't read the details because it's far too graphic, but needless to say, he's in pretty bad shape when they find him. They tried asking him what happened, and he just keeps insisting that he has not been shot and he has no idea what they're talking about. He passes away pretty soon after that. Baseball cancels all of the games on August 2nd because that is the day of his funeral. So again, still a highly respected guy that baseball cancels literally all their games across the board just because they want people to be able to honor him and go to his funeral. So
Wow.
little known guy, but pretty sad story there.
Yeah, it must have been pretty influential for them to cancel the games like that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then another guy who, mental health not being what it is today, who knows if that's something that he could have gotten help for, or somebody would have tried to encourage him to seek help for.
Yeah.
Back then it probably was worried that if you admitted to somebody you were struggling, that they were going to just lock you away in an institution. So just unfortunate. Next guy we'll talk about is Dwayne Haskins. Haskins was a quarterback who is recruited by Ohio State, becomes their starter in 2018, and promptly lights the world on fire. 4,800 yards passing, 50 touchdown passes in 2018, wins the Big Ten championship game, wins the Rose Bowl, is the MVP of both of those games. Steve, I forgot how good Dwayne Haskins was at Ohio State. I did not remember that he threw 50 touchdown passes.
In the college season.
Yeah, in a college season.
Like, what is that, 10, 12 games?
That's a lot.
That's 4 touchdown passes a game.
Yeah. Yeah, impressive. He's selected in the first round of the draft by the Washington, whatever they were called at the time. And he kind of has like the traditional rookie season. He sits behind a veteran for a while. Then they make him the starter. He's still getting his footing. Like really, really similar to Kenny Pickett's rookie season in Pittsburgh, right? So then he goes into 2020. That's his second year. And that's kind of the year where, okay, he's not a rookie anymore. They make him the starting quarterback right at the beginning of the season. He gets all the first team reps. They actually even make him a team captain. So it's really his team to lead now. So big expectations, but it does not go well. Haskins plays poorly, and the Washington coaches reportedly are upset with his work ethic. He loses his starting job in only 4 weeks into that season, which is, I mean, when you have a franchise quarterback, your quarterback of the future, even if he's struggling, you think you're going to stick with him longer than 4 weeks. So that, to me, Steve, that tells me that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, I think that rookie year he wasn't like showing up and stuff, and yeah, some guys like I think you know he started his whole career had all this success, and all of a sudden doesn't realize the level of talent has jumped up that much, and you kind of got to rise to the occasion.
Hmm. Yeah, and to make matters worse, he's photographed at an event, and there seems to be some dispute as to whether that event was a birthday party or a strip club. But the real controversy is that he's hanging out with a bunch of people without a mask on. And remember, this is 2020. The NFL had these very strict COVID protocols for its players. So Washington decides to release him in the middle of that season, which is shocking because he'd been drafted to be their franchise quarterback just 18 months before that. And the Steelers decide they're going to take a flyer on him. They sign him to back up Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph for the 2021 season. And after that season, Ben retires. So it's a really good opportunity for Haskins to get his career back on track because the Steelers had Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky, and Haskins as their quarterbacks. And this is before the draft, right? And before they drafted Kenny Pickett. So, I mean, at that point, Haskins probably has just as good of a chance to win that job than any of the other two guys. And Steve, you and I talked about this at the time. I remember thinking maybe this could be a steal because, like you said, he's young. He goes to a place like Ohio State where you're elevated to godlike status for being the
Yeah,
star quarterback at a place like Ohio State. It's going to make you lax. Maybe, you know, um, like you said, you never realized you had to work hard. Then he gets drafted by arguably the most toxic organization in the NFL.
yeah,
And like violating the COVID protocols was dumb. Like you should have just been more careful. But it wasn't like he killed someone, right? He wasn't, it was just him being dumb. And it just like you just saw this as like a maybe he'll come to an organization, he'll have to work for a starting job and he'll turn things around because he still had a ton of talent. I mean, didn't you think he was? I just thought he was very talented athletically.
he was tall. He wasn't Jamarcus Russell. He actually had some skills, but he ends up kind of having the career arc of Jamarcus Russell, unfortunately. Um, Fortunately for him, but like, I just I don't to say the guy just couldn't get it together between the years. His problem was all between the years. It really was, and he just never could get it together between the years. Leading up to just more just off the field stuff that he just never could quite for whatever reason. He just and and you can I know people have gotten in trouble for criticizing it, but I'm sure we'll go over that. I mean, it's the situation he was in at that time was of his own doing. I'll leave it at that. I mean, the reason he ended up, ending tragically is because, he did it, no one else was responsible for that but him.
Yeah, yeah. So what Steve's referring to is on the morning of April 9th, 2022, he's struck by a truck while inexplicably trying to cross a really, really busy interstate in Florida. And it's a bizarre story because why would he be walking on a 4-lane interstate at 7 o'clock in the morning? There were initial reports that his rental car ran out of gas, but then why wouldn't you just call for help? Why would you go out walking? This isn't 1981 where you had to go walk to a gas station. I was really praying that it would just come out that there was some logical explanation, but to what Steve was talking about, what came out was that he had a blood alcohol level of 0.24, which is incredibly over the legal limit. And he had multiple drugs in his system. He was also reportedly in the rental car with a woman who was not his wife. So I just feel for his widow and his family because not only do they lose a 24-year-old kid with his whole life in front of him, but now they have to deal with there being this, you know, kind of seedy details around his death. I will mention, to be fair, that there was a lawsuit filed by the family alleging that Haskins was the target of a quote blackmail and robbery conspiracy, and that he was drugged prior to his death. Whether or not that's true, I'm not sure we'll ever know the answer to that. But to your point, Steve, just that was kind of his. Unfortunately,
It's a
that was
shame because there's been a lot of other quarterbacks, a lot of other players in the league that have done stupid stuff and
yes,
are
gotten
still
away with it.
alive.
Yeah,
Like Ken Stabler, was infamous. What's his name from the '50s? Played quarterback for the Steelers.
yeah,
Wrecked his car into a trolley. Um, what was his name?
Bobby Lane.
Yeah, Bobby
Yeah,
Lane. I mean, he isn't the first person to have these kind of problems. He won't be the last. But it's a shame that he had to pay the price with his life.
it really is, and again, car accidents and stuff like that are tragic to begin with. But when you have again all those seedy details and seemingly, like you said, self-inflicted based on what the findings of the investigation were. It just super unfortunate and sad. And he really did have a great chance there. The Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger had retired, and
They don't draft Kenny Pickett if he's on the team. If he's on the team, I don't think they draft Kenny Pickett.
I
I
think
really
that's
do. Yeah.
uh, a fair statement. I
I
obviously,
don't know who drafts Kenny Pickett at that point. Maybe the Jets. The Jets love fit players. So
but
I don't
but I
know.
mean that it just he just had a ton of talent, and like you said, really it was more about him just not having it, like you said, between the ears. But there's plenty of guys like that who've been able to turn their careers around with maturity
Yeah.
and time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the mistakes just that he made, he didn't get that time, whereas other people, for whatever reason, have been able to,
Well, even Terry
work through that.
Bradshaw has had his issues,
Hmm.
but it hasn't cost him his life, thank goodness. He's
Right.
been able to have a successful career.
Yeah. So just a very sad story there. The next guy we'll talk about is Bob Johnson. Bob Johnson has an interesting early life. He serves as a medic in the Korean War. I never knew that, Steve.
I did not. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's that's unbelievable.
Yeah, and then he becomes a teacher, and eventually he starts.
It was a great day to practice medicine, I guess. Yeah.
That's what he used to say every day at the battle lines. He starts coaching hockey. He's a very successful college head coach, and then he has some success in the NHL. He takes the Calgary Flames to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1986. They do lose that series to Montreal. In 1990, the Penguins are going through an identity crisis. At this point, they have had Mario Lemieux on their roster for 6 seasons. He's the best player in hockey, but they've only made the playoffs once in those 6 seasons, which is hard to believe because you have to remember back then the NHL had 21 teams and 16 made the playoffs, just like they do now. So literally, that means in five of Mario's first 6 seasons, the Penguins were among the five worst teams in the league.
Yeah, and then one year they lost to the Flyers, and that was that was that series where they just scored a bunch of goals, and they couldn't win in Philadelphia. Remember, they
Yes.
just kept losing at the
Yeah.
Spectrum.
Yeah. So I mean, they were. You look at like where the Oilers are right now with McDavid, and
Yeah, they are kind of in the same spot. Yeah,
they're kind of in the same spot, but they've at least been in the playoffs,
yeah,
even won a
yeah.
playoff series or two. I mean, Mario, they like you said, they had that one year where they made it to the second round, lost to Philly in Game 7, but that was it. They were just awful. And here they have this generational talent. So when Bob Johnson is hired, uh, they're really at a crossroads, and that's really that comes with a whole wave of kind of front office house cleaning. Craig Patrick is brought in to be the general manager. Scotty Bowman is brought in to be the director of player development, and then Johnson is brought in to coach the team. Bob Johnson, really well liked coach by both the fans and the players, and that was really welcome at that point because the Penguins had cycled through these guys like Pierre Creamer and Gene Ubriaco, who were not well liked,
Raka.
especially by Mario. And we'll have to get into some of those stories in a different podcast. But yeah, Gene Ubriaco and Creamer were just not coaches that were good fits here in Pittsburgh. Uh, so as Steve mentioned, Bob Johnson had this great catchphrase, which was "It's a great day for hockey." And sure enough, the Penguins undergo a huge turnaround. They win their division for the first time ever, and then Johnson leads them on this magical run through the playoffs, which culminates in a Stanley Cup. And that was
And him
again,
being called the professor by who was the coach of the Bruins back then?
oh, shoe guy, Mike
Yeah,
Melberry.
Mike
Yeah,
Milbury called him
yeah,
the professor.
that's right. uh, that was big. I mean, the Penguins were this moribund franchise. They had been around for about 25 years at that point, never done anything, and here they are winning the Stanley Cup again. Kind of like we talked about with Michel Briere, their best years are in front of them. Sadly, though, just a few months after winning the Cup, Johnson is diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer, and he passes away on November 26, 1991, which was what 5 or 6 months after they won the Cup.
Yeah, that next season was very sad. They had like a candlelight ceremony for him in the arena, and just very tragic. It this is one of the more, and it happened like like you said, while the Penguins were really rising to prominence. Like you said, looked like they had they did have at least one more cup run in them, and maybe more. Maybe he keeps Mario happy. I don't know, but it seems like hockey coaches are fired or hired to be fired. So
Fair. I think it's to me it's less tragic for the franchise and more tragic for just him personally because think about like this is a guy that like he his whole profession he literally reaches the pinnacle of his entire profession and seemingly has like you said a dynasty to lead forward and then just like that he's gone.
yeah,
you know and I know my pastor always talks about how life's greatest trials often follow life's greatest highlights. And he uses that as a reason why our faith is so important because life is unpredictable and nothing really is ever guaranteed to us. And I think this is just such a perfect example of that.
yeah, you never know. Every day above ground. just gotta
That's
be
right.
just gotta be happy. I'm just happy to be here, Tim. Just happy to be
That's
here.
right. That's right. It's a good perspective to have. Next guy we'll talk about is David Little. Little is an an inside linebacker for the Steelers in the 1980s. And he's a pretty good linebacker. He makes a Pro Bowl. He's voted team MVP in 1988. And he starts 89 consecutive games at one point. So definitely a very solid guy. He has the unfortunate distinction of playing on some really bad Steelers teams. You know, the guy who came before him at that position was Jack Lambert, and the guy who comes after him is Levon Kirkland.
Kind of sandwiched in there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just and if he plays in a different era or on a different even on a different team in that era, he's probably much more heralded as a star player. He's also very active off the field. So today the Steelers have this tradition where their players visit Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, and they always take pictures and they post it on the Steelers website and stuff like that. David Little's the guy who started that, although he didn't do it as part of some organized team PR activity.
He just did it.
He would just go there every Tuesday to visit kids. No cameras, no
That's like,
fanfare.
remember Troy would do that? Troy, he
Mhm.
would just, no cameras, no nothing, just like, oh, I'm going up and visiting. Like, they'd be like, hey, here's Troy Polamalu. Like that's so cool. Like I like it when they do it and they don't tell anybody. It's because it's like, I think it shows some sincerity. Whereas like sometimes you see people like, okay, you're just, here to make the news.
I there was an article I read years ago in Sports Illustrated, Steve. It was this very long form article that somebody did about George Steinbrenner. And George Steinbrenner was a guy obviously that was not well liked, didn't have a good public reputation. And the author of this article had dug in and found all these stories that Steinbrenner wouldn't confirm, but other people in the story did about him, helping people. And this waitress paid for her son to get this surgery that saved his life. And the reporter's like, my goodness, look at all this stuff you've done. People don't even know about this. People would think so much differently of you if they knew all this stuff. And Steinbrenner said something to the effect of, if you're giving to someone and someone besides you and the other person knows about it, then it's not giving. And that always stuck with me because if there was ever a guy that could have used uh,
A PR
a
move,
PR
yeah.
boost, and he just was like, no, I don't care because it's not the right thing to do. And that just always stuck with me.
Maybe just like the badass rep too. Like, yeah,
He did kind of lean into that a little bit. Like he even hosted Saturday Night Live once and did a sketch where he was playing like a grocery store manager and thought it was ridiculous that they were hiring and firing all the workers. And so he did have a sense of humor about his reputation. But that always stuck with me is that if you're giving to someone to show everybody how great of a person you are, and taking cameras and all that stuff. I still think about that when I see the Steelers or any other sports team post about things like, oh, look at our players visited the hospital today.
and
So
I think sometimes it is sincere and it's not terrible, but I don't.
yeah, that just always stuck with me, that George Steinbrenner story. And I think
But
David
there's
Little
also
was
like people
similar.
like Ton Chilkin and Craig Wolfley that when they do their walk for the homeless, but they're doing it to raise money for the Light of Life mission, and
Well, in that case, you have to be
yeah,
public because
that's
you're
a
trying to raise money.
fundraiser. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
fundraiser. It's not
right.
just hey, like I'm sure both of them go down. I know for a fact Tunch did. I'm sure Craig does too. They go down to the Light of Life, and they
Right.
probably don't even know they were there.
Right. So that's kind of the person David Little was. What happened to him in 2005? He's lifting weights at his home in Florida, and he accidentally drops a 250-pound weight on his chest, and it rolls onto his neck and suffocates him, and he dies at the age of 46. So just a tragic way for him to die, just an accident lifting weights.
It's
He
like something
survived.
out of a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think he had some kind of. They said he had some kind of heart condition that kind of like caused like these little flutterances, and so it was. They think that that's probably what caused him to drop the weight in the first place. But then once it rolled onto his neck, he couldn't get it off. He survived by his wife Denise. They had 3 children. So just again, incredibly sad. Good guy. Hopefully, a guy that people will remember in Steeler history because he wasn't on the '70s teams. He wasn't on the '90s teams. He wasn't on the 2000s teams. Some of the great teams. He that one stretch of time in the last 50 years where they were bad. That was basically his whole career.
That's a shame. That's a shame. Because he seems like a very good person. I've heard of him, but I didn't know much about him. But I do remember that weight story. Him like
Hmm.
it's just a weird thing, like just a total fluke thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to like other people that like it's kind of he didn't put himself in a bad situation. I mean, you never know when you're going to go. I guess it goes back to that. Whether it's just some sort of weird twist of fate, like a cancer or an
Hmm.
accident, or you know, you're doing stuff that maybe isn't the wisest course of action,
Right. Yeah. And that's the kind of the thread through this whole episode is, like you said, that very different accidents, maybe putting yourself in bad situations or other people causing you harm. And that's really what happens to the next guy on our list. It's Jose Castillo. He's the Pirates' starting second baseman in the 2000s. Like David Little, plays on some very bad Pirates teams. At one point, the Pirates were touting him as one of their hot young prospects, but as usually is the case for hot Pirate prospects, Castillo never really lives up to that billing. He's out of baseball altogether by 2009. In 2018, Castillo and Angels infielder Luis Valbuena are riding in a car in Venezuela when it's ambushed by robbers. These guys in Venezuela had this scheme where they'd place this really large rock in the middle of the road, and then when a car would crash into it, they would rob the car. But in this instance, they tried to dodge the rock. It flips over, and Castillo and Valbuena are both killed. 4 people, including 2 teenagers, are charged with their murder. But Jose Castillo also, taken very young and and is murdered by these guys that are trying to rob people on the highway. So another just very sad story.
Yeah, yeah. And what was that, Venezuela? You said?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean that's a very tragic thing, and obviously once again, kind of forces beyond his control.
right.
So I don't know. I don't really remember him much, but once again, the Pirates have been not that good. So I recognize the name, but I don't remember like I remember Freddie Garcia or the second baseman more than him.
But we could do a whole episode of um just the next guy for the Pirates for the last 30 years, right? Chad Hermanson and Chris
Oh
Benson.
wow, yeah.
And I mean, just in you would at the time you would have known the names because if you listen to sports talk radio or anything, oh yeah, and he's doing really good in AAA right now. When are the Pirates going to bring him up? And there would be a lot of hype, and then just as quickly it's forgotten because it didn't work out. So I think that would be an interesting list to
Yeah,
go through because there's been so many of those guys, Steve, in the last 30 years. And
yeah.
I think we often remember, the Pirates trading away all their prospects or whatever, but really a lot of them, they've made a lot of trades where they've gotten prospects
But
back,
they never turn out.
but they
Yeah.
never turn out. So Castillo kind of fit into that category. Next on our list, I'm going to lump both these guys together: Todd Becker and Billy Gaines, two Pitt football players who die in eerily
Uh,
similar ways.
yeah. Oh man.
So Todd Becker is a linebacker on the 1982 team, and in December of that year, Pitt is ranked number 6 in the country. They're going to play in the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Day, which remember back then the New Year's Day bowls was like the big thing. There was no playoff or anything like that.
Yeah.
The night before they're scheduled to leave for that game, there's a big party on campus. It's finals week, it's college. So a lot of college kids drinking in the dorms, letting off steam, nothing really unusual there. Well, Todd Becker had been banned from the dorms at Pitt. And Steve, do you know why he was banned from the dorms at Pitt?
Drinking too much.
No, no, maybe drug use, right? Violence,
Oh,
something's kind of violent. No, he had squirted a fire extinguisher when he was a freshman.
so it's just like general hijinks.
Yeah.
We don't put up with that at the University of
I
Pittsburgh.
just,
Yeah.
and this is significant because this kind of factors into the story, him being banned. So he wasn't allowed in the dorms, but he sneaks in because it's a party and he wants to be part of it. And later that night, the campus police show up because I guess somebody had pulled a fire alarm, and Todd Becker panics. He knows he's not supposed to be there.
Well, what are they gonna do? They're gonna kick him out.
Well, that again, this is your remember, Steve. You're put yourself in his shoes. You're a college
Yeah.
kid. You've probably had a
Yeah.
few drinks, and all you hear is sirens.
So you're
And
gonna
you're about
run.
to fly to Texas to play in the Cotton Bowl. So you're thinking if you get caught, maybe you don't get to play in the Cotton Bowl. Maybe you even get kicked off the team. It's not like you have a lot of time to like rationalize and be like, well, what's the
Mm.
worst they're going to do? And I could probably appeal. Like you're not thinking any of that, right? You're just thinking like, oh crap, I got to
If
get
I
out of
run, I
here.
can get away with it. Yeah.
Yes. So what he decides to do, he tries to climb out of a third story window. A couple of other students try to stop him, but he's in college. He's a linebacker. He's like, I can jump out. I can make this jump. Unfortunately, he hits a protruding air conditioner, spins in midair, and then lands on the pavement below head first, and he dies at the age of 20.
That's yeah. Wow. That's horrible.
Yeah, it is. It is horrible, and it's not. It's not. I don't want to blame the university for banning him from the dorms for something stupid, but man, if that hadn't happened, maybe he doesn't try to jump out the window. And certainly not a smart idea to try to jump out a third story window. But again, 20 years old, you think you're invincible, and then unfortunately finds out that he's not.
Yeah, that was a bad lot of poor decisions there on his part.
Yeah.
Uh,
2 decades later, Billy Gaines is a wide receiver on the 2003 Pitt football team. He and teammate David Abdul had a fire that damaged their apartment, so they're temporarily living at the St. Anne's Church in Homestead. And on June 18th, there's a cookout at the church. Gaines and Abdul have a few drinks. Later in the night, they decide they want to explore this old church. Apparently, there's some legends about these mysterious markings that are hidden in the rafters of the church. And I don't. This was around the time
Yeah.
that the Da Vinci Code was really popular, Steve. So maybe they were thinking like
Oh,
it was,
jeez.
it's an old church. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll find something interesting up there in the ceiling. Again, they're college kids, right? Just something interesting to do. Unfortunately, while they're up there, Gaines loses his footing. He crashes into the pews below and he's killed at the age of 19. It's a really sad situation. The reverend at the church is even charged with involuntary manslaughter since he's the one who had provided the alcohol at the cookout that night.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that. Oh, wow.
yeah,
Jeez.
yeah. And Steve, do you remember Billy Gaines?
Yes, I remember that. And I remember David Abdul was never, he was a pretty decent kicker that first year. Then after that, he just was never the same after that. He just really wasn't.
Yeah, I
Always
mean
kind of felt bad for him.
he's up there. He's the one that he's the one that's with him when he dies. I mean, that's a hard thing to deal with at that
Yeah,
age.
kind of. And then I think he was in a car accident and he broke his leg after that. Like he just, I think he's still alive. I don't think, but that kind of messed, that like kind of derailed his college career.
Yeah, yeah. Sad all around. Todd Becker and Billy Gaines, probably young men who, again, like most of us at that age, just probably thought they were indestructible, and they're both killed the same way in a fall.
Yeah, you do stupid stuff. I've done plenty of stupid stuff, so that sometimes you just
Yeah,
yeah, gotta be careful out there.
yeah. Great grace of God that we're still here, right?
Yeah,
Just some of the dumb
yeah,
stuff
for
we've done.
sure,
So,
for sure. Yeah.
last guy on our list is going to be Eugene Big Daddy Lipscomb. Lipscomb is a massive NFL defensive lineman back in the 50s and 60s. 6'6", 288 pounds, which I think would be big today, but back then you didn't have players that size. Uh, so he's a giant. He plays on those 1950s Johnny Unitas Colts teams that were winning championships, and he has a lot of success there. And the Steelers, as we talked about in our episode we did about Buddy Parker, are very much in the win now mode, and they're very into trading draft picks and young players for proven veterans. So they swing a trade for the 30-year-old Lipscomb in 1961, which is a little bit of a risk trading for a veteran who's 30, but it works out really well for the Steelers. Lipscomb leads the NFL in sacks during his first year in Pittsburgh, and he's named to the Pro Bowl in his second season as a Steeler. He's also well liked by the fans. There's stories about him seeing a kid on the street without shoes and walking him and his mother into a store to buy them clothes, stuff like that. People said he had a really big heart. He's really a bona fide superstar player, but regrettably, he's battling a lot of demons off the field. Lipscomb had a truckload of childhood trauma. His father died when he was a baby, and then when he was 11, his mother was pretty brutally murdered by her boyfriend. He was also always a big kid, so he was teased and mocked a lot. And when his mother died, the family member who they sent him to live with beat him. So that's a lot to carry into adulthood. As an adult, he can't sleep at night unless he pushes his bed against the door to block intruders. He also keeps a gun under his pillow. He also carries the police homicide photos of his mother around in his pocket and shows them to people. So I don't know, Steve, if that's not a red flag of.
Yeah, yeah. He did drugs too.
Yeah, well, and that's where it ends up going, and
Yeah,
he medicates that pain with substance abuse and sex addiction. And again, once again, an era where mental health awareness is not what it is today, although certainly people medicating with addiction is still pretty common
yeah,
today, even with mental health being where it is. It cost him 3 marriages, and by the time he's a Steeler, he hasn't slowed down much at all. In fact, in retrospect, a lot of people think that what led Baltimore to trade him to the Steelers in the first place was that they just couldn't put up with his antics anymore. Because it was kind of a surprising trade. He was one of their best players, and they traded him away, and that's probably why. Again, Also an era where you didn't really know about players' lives off the field like you do today.
Yeah.
The Steelers certainly don't help his situation at all. Bobby Lane, who Steve mentioned earlier, he always takes the team out drinking. And while he buys beers for the other players, he always buys Gene Lipscomb a full bottle of whiskey.
Oh wow. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, that's not going to help. This all comes to a head on May 10th, 1963. Lipscomb is out partying with a guy named Tim Black, who is an admitted heroin user with an extensive criminal record. And at some point in the wee hours of the morning, Black says that Lipscomb injects himself with a higher amount of heroin, and he's unable to wake him up, so he calls an ambulance, but Lipscomb is dead on arrival. A lot of teammates and Gene Lipscomb's ex-wives are highly skeptical of that story. They say that Lipscomb was super, super terrified of needles and would have never used heroin. They think that Tim Black, who was, like we said, an admitted criminal, had drugged him to try to steal his money. So maybe some similarities there with the Dwayne Haskins story where, was it bad? Was it a guy very similar to Dwayne Haskins, a guy with a history of bad decisions, seemingly makes some bad decisions that end his life, but the family thinks, yes, he made bad decisions, but in this instance, there was foul play involved. Whether or not that's true, don't know.
Yeah, it's a tragic end for him. I think I went over him Steeler Dark Ages a little bit. And, he just wish he would have been around a little longer. Maybe the Steelers would have had a more success. For him, just in general, is he in the NFL Hall of Fame? I don't think so.
I don't believe he is. Yeah. And
So,
like you said, maybe if he has a couple more years under his belt. The autopsy they did on him found that he actually had massive liver disease from all the drinking that he did. So he was probably not long for this earth, regardless.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but it just that's a good example, I think, of a guy. And I don't know what Dwayne Haskins' childhood was like, but I think you look at guys like that and you're like, how could you throw away all this glory and success that you could have had? And I'd kill to make that much money and be a star and be beloved and all that. But then you have no idea sometimes what these people dealt with, in their pasts and stuff that it's just really, really hard to overcome without a ton of work and a ton of help, which probably wasn't as readily available in 1963.
Yeah, and they didn't make as much money back then. They almost made like an average wage. So
that's a good point too.
Yeah.
So that's our episode. Again, sad stories all the way around, just guys that you wish would have been here longer, but wanted to remember their lives and their careers, in some cases brought us as Pittsburgh fans a lot of joy and were fun to watch, and just want to make sure they're remembered, because some of these guys like Michel Briere, people like that, just, think they get lost to time eventually.
Especially Briere. I think I don't know. I knew about that Lipscomb guy. Like he was kind of a larger than life character, but definitely, and at least Justin Strelzik, was in the movie and stuff. So, good to be remembered. Good to remember these people for their many accomplishments on the field, at least.
Yes. Well, folks, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate all the folks who tune into this podcast. Please check us out on social media, on Facebook or Twitter. Check out our website. All those links are in the show description. And please tell your friends about the podcast. Word of mouth is always our best way to get new listeners. We'll catch you next time here on the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast.